Okay, so welcome back. This is part two of our series Unspoken, brought to you by the Albert Wilson Foundation and Handy. We have a great panelist lined up and you all are in for a treat. So part two is titled Discovering Black. So do you remember the day you became a color? So we have a great panel lined up. I'll do a brief introduction. We have back for week two, the great leader in Broward County in South Florida, also known as Kirk Brown, CEO of Handy. We have Dr. Charmaine Borda, Clinical Director of the Blue Couch Incorporated. We have Phillip Merrin, CEO and founder of the Blitz, Inc. We have Jason Jenkins, Senior VP of Communications and Community Affairs for the Miami Dolphins. And we have Adamma Ducille, Assistant Director of Training and Capacity Building for Children's Services Council of Broward County. So thank you all for joining us tonight. So for the sake of time, we will dive right in. And Kirk, once again, we will start with you. So if you don't mind, tell us more about the thought process behind titling this conversation, Discovering Black. And can you tell us about a time or do you remember how old you were when you became a color?
Okay, so it's quite interesting about discovering Black. And as I go through the journey of becoming a color, you will hear the theme of why it's called Discovering Black. I'm a Jamaican transplant to America at the age of 16 and a half. So I get to America and I'm grateful for the opportunity and the adventure and the ability to build a greater framework for my life. I get here and I have a job within like a week and I'm happy. I'm blessed. I have a job. So I'm working at this company and, you know, I am straightening shelves in the stock room. And one Friday, you know, it just so happened it was raining and my supervisor just kept calling me and was like, hey, go get the carts down. For you young people listening, we used to go get the carts from the parking lot and push them in the store. A machine didn't do it for us. So, you know, went and got the carts and I'm pushing in the carts in the rain like the third time. I get in the building and there's this elderly Black gentleman yelling at my supervisor, which was a white individual. And he's yelling at him and I walk in and the Black gentleman points at me and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? And he's like, you've called this boy 3 times and sent him in the rain and these 2 boys were standing next to you. You've not sent them out there not once. Now, immediately I'm thinking, I just got this job. Don't mess this up for me. You know, I'm just happy to be working. I didn't understand what was going on. So that passed. That night, I'm cleaning the restrooms and it hit me. I've never seen them clean the restrooms. I clean the restroom. Never seen them take the garbage out. I take the garbage out. So I'm like, okay. So the thing bothered me the entire night because I went through the entire like month and a half that I've been working there, the things that I did versus what they do, right? They're my age, we attend the same school. And the next day, I'm talking to a colleague of mine at the school, Black American young man, and he goes, so I'm telling him, and in the middle of it, he just went, oh, so you found out you Black, huh? So coming from the Caribbean, I'm just Kirk. I'm just Jamaican, right? This was an introduction. I discovered I was Black at 16 and a half, right? And when I mean discovering I was Black, it meant the things in the sociological atmosphere that came with that. So I looked at him, I'm like, what? He was like, oh yeah. And then he told me about the day he realized he was Black also. He was a color. And I was angry the entire night until I heard from him that he was 6 years old. So here I am angry at 16 and a half. And this person who lives in this country knew this at 6. So I discovered I was a color at 16 and a half, and he's been dealing with it since he was 6. So I have a white friend at school, and I tried to explain it to him, and it was foreign to him. He never knew this happened. He was clueless about that entire journey, the entire interaction. And from that day came actualizing the look, seeing the difference in treatment, hearing my teacher after an English presentation say, "You speak so well. Where did you learn that word?" Never asked all the other students in the class, right? And I just saw these different levels of treatment because of the color of my skin. Some people even told me, literally to my face, that I'm asking you just because you're Black. Mm-hmm. Right? So discovering Black and the trauma and the understanding that comes with it happened for me and started with me at 16 and a half. I'm now 45, and I've yet said this to a Black person or a person of color in America that doesn't go back to a moment or a day that they realize themselves that they went from human to color. Mm. So that's why we named this segment Discovering Color. And also someone who went through a school of social work, we realize all of the trauma that comes with the day you realize you're a color and the reminders that come after that to remind you you're a color, directly, indirectly, whether it be as a result of implicit bias, whether it be as a result of a systemic journey, or whether it be just an individual who on that day wanted to remind you, I see you as a color.
Thank you for sharing. And to follow up with that, you just mentioned you're 45, the work that you do as the CEO of Handy and social work, how does that impact you today? And even thinking about these conversations and what you want to touch on, can you kind of talk through the trauma that it brought back up, even trying to remember or think back on some of the things that you wanted to touch on or some of those experiences you dealt with growing up? Well,
I feel like growing up in that atmosphere gave me the ability to be the mirror for the young people that we serve at Handy. So Handy, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit in Broward County that has served young people since 1985, kids in foster care, relative care, and homeless youth throughout our community in Broward County. And being in that special situation and being able to explain to them those journeys and being there for them when they go through those instances in our society where they feel like they've been treated indifferent, and then standing up to the different systems and the entry to those systems for those young people is, something that we do really well and Handy through, the support of the Children's Services Council and so many other entities in our community that gives us the ability to have life coaches that are culturally aware and are also agents of change for the young people that we serve. So for example, we have a young person who went through something and then got told she spoke so well and she was so upset. And we had to sit her down, and then we sat the person down that said that to her, that, they're just socially programmed. When we really sat down with a person, Adamma talks about the walk, and took them on the walk or the journey, they realized that they were just socially programmed to say that when they heard someone speak well, when they heard someone of color speak well, right? So it was a learning experience for them both. And we take the approach of being informers into our system, bridge builders and bridge crossers, because that's how we get to the other side on this journey. And also having these candid discussions with our white colleagues about, the feeling. If I can make any recommendation to our white colleagues is check the racists in your circle. You know who they are. And if you don't know who they are and you hear something, do something, because that causes repeated trauma for our young people and for our community. It's that simple.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We're going to go right into Dr. Charmaine Borda, Clinical Director of the Blue Couch. So in your profession, if you don't mind, tell us more about the work that you do. And you also mentioned that you're a teacher as well. So following up with some of the things that Kirk mentioned, how does discovering Black correlate or tie into your work and some of the things that come up in your environment?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing this discussion to happen, making space for it. So Kirk, I also I'm Jamaican, and I came here when I was 7 years old. And I started to go to school in my elementary school at the time was Little River Elementary in Miami, Miami-Dade. Anyone know Little River? Um, but it was predominantly Black. At the time, I didn't know what that was until I went to school, and I just came from Jamaica, and I thought I was looking cute, and I had bubbles in my hair and the pleated skirts and the dresses, and I thought, okay, dressing up, going to school, because education was such a big part of our culture in our world. And to look nice meant the bubbles in the hair and all sorts of nice frilly dresses. Well, I was soon, now I know it to be bullied and sort of marginalized with, oh, look at the Haitian over there with the bubbles in her hair, and she thinks she's cute, da, 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 and I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what Haitian was. And so I was immediately labeled as the Black Haitian girl, who, always dressed in these crazy bubbles and things like that. I knew myself to be Jamaican. I didn't know myself to be Black, and I certainly didn't know what Haitian was. And so I was sort of in this, I now could articulate it as culture shock of and confusion of what that meant and what that was. And this was introduced to me by my peers at school, 7 and 8 year olds and things like that. And kids are loving and kind, and they can also be not so loving and kind at times, and they're unfiltered. And so I bore the brunt of that unfiltered, all those unfiltered moments. And I didn't have anyone at home or in my circle or friends or teachers or anything like that to really talk to me and help me understand what that was about. And so I was here defending or saying I'm Jamaican, then it became sort of a defense thing, that I didn't, so you don't want to be Haitian anymore. You're now Jamaican. So I think that was a challenge, certainly a challenging moment, but it wasn't until later on in life that I realized what that was about and the history and the context in which I was living in. I was living in Miami in the 80s, early 80s, 80, 83, where there was a lot of talk about the Muriel boat lift, and wet foot, dry foot came into existence. And, we were having Cubans coming in on the boats, and then Haitians were coming in on the boats, and they were, the discrepancy between Haitians and Cubans then became this culture war and this fight. And so Americans became overwhelmed with, people are coming onto our land, and we need to sort of protect our land, and we then created policies for Cubans, and we didn't create policies for Haitians. So it became this, black and white fight. And so now, not only were we being marginalized as, people who wanted to take over a land, but we're also not given the right to plead our case, in that way. So, and that was, again, not until later that I understood the context of it all. And certainly there's more to be said about that. And then, of course, when I get into my teenage years, I really didn't identify as, I didn't really find my identity, I guess. I was then adopted or had a failed adoption, and I was adopted into a white family. And my immediate responses in order to survive in that family was, I wanted to look like them. I wanted to have the straight hair. I wanted to have the curly hair. I wanted to feel like I belonged. And of course, when I had questions about, well, not of course, but when I had questions about, what would people say about my Blackness in your whiteness? We look different. My adoptive mom would say, it's a blood thing. So that doesn't explain anything to me. And that certainly doesn't explain anything to my peers and people who are having questions about who I am and why am I with this white family and things like that. And frankly, I didn't understand it either. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who to talk to. And again, it became sort of reified. And then I became stifled in my curiosity, because who knows what to say? Do I even have the opportunity to talk about this? And I don't know who to go to help me understand what I should be, who I should be, what I should be saying, what I should be asking. And so like Kirk, like you, I then became in high school, I started to have a different cultural experience. I started to be around people who looked more like me, who I think I wanted to look more like and be more like. And then I became sort of what my environment was, so I figured over the years I had to become a chameleon in that because I needed to survive in the world. And it wasn't until I became a professional learning and growing in college that I realized that there's so much more to this. There's many nuances to this experience that I need to talk about and write about and, hold space for. And then I became introduced, I was introduced to psychology and social work and family therapy and things like that. And started to have discussions around this, around race and culture, because I now had children and they were asking questions about their own origins and their own race. And they are both Jamaican and Haitian. Long story about that, but they're both Jamaican and Haitian. And so often we would have conversations about what they felt they needed to honor, the Jamaican, Haitian, American. And interesting enough for me, I didn't know how to situate myself in any of those experiences solidly enough to be able to articulate to them who they were. Because it wasn't, you are this one thing, you are so many things, you are such a nuanced person. And also you want to know about your heritage, your generations, your history. And coming from where I came from, that was sort of lost. So long story, even longer, yes, I became a family therapist and I started to work with kids in foster care, and I started to work with lots of couples and interracial couples, and started to have really deep conversations about what this meant, how they are in their families, how they are in their marriage, what they don't understand, and gaps in their communication. And so I became sort of a sounding board for that. And so what Phillip said earlier was, you go into therapy, and so you try to find someone who understands, but my experience is that we don't always understand. You don't, sometimes we feel like the need to say we understand, but we don't always understand. And it's okay. As a therapist, to me, I've embraced the reality that I don't always understand. And for me, it has to be that we start with empathy, and empathy means that really I don't understand, but I want to learn. And I wonder if you would invite me, I can sit next to you and we can learn together. And I think that speaks to a development of trust and an opportunity for us to have deeper level, larger level, more meaningful conversations around and into the subject matter and the reality of race and gender and ethnicity in our world.
Thank you. I want you to expound on it, because you finished out mentioning the word trust, and that was something that Phillip also mentioned earlier about trust being the gateway. So how are those conversations, whether it's with your own children or with the foster youth that you work with? You might expound more on the process and breaking down those barriers to have those conversations.
Well, I mean, I think it was, this quote has been reiterated over and over so many years. And it's one of my favorite quotes. And it says, I don't care what you know until I know that you care. And I think that's it for me. I think barriers are broken down when people know that you care, specifically with our Handy youth. I would say I'm on the board of Handy's board of directors, and I've worked with them for many years. And our kids are so connected to our staff and our community. And for a long time, I was an outsider coming in, and these boys and girls, young men and women don't, they gravitate to people who care. They don't care what you know. They don't care how many degrees you have. They want to know that you care, and they have a keen detection system and how to be able to ascertain if you care. And I think that's what it is in therapy as well. People could come to me because they read up and they know, and this is what they see on paper. But when you meet me and when you're in that room with me, if I come across with this sense of air that you can't connect with, the relationship won't develop, right? It won't develop. And I don't necessarily think you have to start out with trusting me, because frankly, in the therapy room is a place that I would say is probably the most vulnerable place that you'll experience. And often you shouldn't always go in trusting. You should look around, you should feel it out, you should suss it out for yourself, because we are mandated reporters in a lot of ways, and you are being vulnerable, and there are some things that we have to sort of help protect you from, or help protect you through. But it is not assumed to me that everybody who sees me is going to automatically trust me, and I don't ask for that. I ask for, well, why don't we get into it, and let's start to think about the process. And maybe if you start to think about the process and what you need, maybe we can develop an idea around the process that you can trust, that you can legitimize, because I think people want to be seen, heard, and validated. And you can't see me if you know already. If you've already punctuated your knowledge of me before you even know what I say or what's going on, and you punctuate, like Phil said, I was trying to find people who understood, and I just, there was just some disconnect. Well, there's going to be disconnect if someone says, I know and I understand. You don't know and you don't understand. So hold space and make room for you to be educated in the process. Not that anyone has to come in and educate me about, everything, but certainly I don't know you. And if I say to you, when I meet you, Jason, I know everything about you because you have books and you're educated, and I see that, you'll be like, okay, that's not, that's just a part of me. And so you would want me to be curious about your larger world, your larger system, your connections, your communities, things that make you feel outside of yourself, and things that make you feel inside of your own comfort zone, and challenging ideas that you think you've always known about yourself that you can't tell anyone. I think those are the spaces that we should hold as therapists for people. So sorry, I'm long-winded in that way. But.
Oh no, don't apologize at all. Don't apologize at all. I think that was great, and we're gonna circle back to some of the things that you touched on already. But for now, we're gonna jump into Phillip. So Phillip is the CEO and founder of Blitz Inc. A plethora of experience, worked with a variety of different youth. So we would love to hear more about Blitz Inc. and the work that you're doing, and then you as well. Tell us about a time where you first realized you were a color, or share some of those experiences growing up.
No problem. So yeah, my name is Phillip Merrin, and the Blitz Corporation is something that I had a vision for about 7 years prior to the launch of giving back. And when I was younger, there was a group that I was in called Europe Express, and they came to our school in middle school and told us that they were going to snatch us up, take us on a bus, and start showing us things. Took us around various places, college tours. They exposed us to so much community service, volunteering. We did AIDS walks. We did everything. It was just when Zosima grew, we did those back in the day in the Overtown Youth Center, and it was like we did so much and was exposed to so much that I felt like when I got older, it was my turn to give back. And I sat on that idea for so long, and finally it came to fruition. I was like, you know what, I want to build leaders, right? But I need to put them in an environment that they feel comfortable and they can be trained, right? Not only would I teach them, but I would learn from them. I think that's the biggest component of my organization, is I want to ensure that people understand that I'm not only just giving information, but I'm learning more and more from the youth, because I feel like they're facing a different battle than I was when I was younger. So it's important to kind of be transparent on both sides, and be, if we can both hear each other, I feel like that trust, as I said, trust is the gateway. That's where we get that trust right there. So started the organization, and I sat down with my mentor, and he brought me in front of Kirk, and Kirk said, you know what, Phillip, I'm going to sit you in front of 127 kids, was that first session in total. And he just heard my vision of what I wanted, told me to stop talking and put me in front of some kids and said, go and do what you need to do. And that first time I sat in front of those kids, there was like 40 kids there. And I was like, hey guys. And I was like, oh boy, here it goes. But someone told me something very amazing. They said success is uncomfortable, right? And you have to be in an uncomfortable situation to push yourself to the limits that you need to. And I found myself just speaking and listening to them, and immediately it started clicking. Never had one bad session with these kids in 3 years. Matter of fact, they all remember me as the Blitz man. We want Blitz back, right? So it was something that I felt proud of, and I was happy to be around people who believed in what I was trying to do for the youth. Now, the first time I experienced color, I was like 8 or 9 years old. And guys, I don't want you to laugh as I say this, right? So my dad used to take me with him in his landscaping job to cut grass. And not too far from where I live now, right here off of 595 in Davie, there was a nice community there where I remember this woman that my dad cut grass for all the time. She used to always come out and give me a lemonade. And one day she was like, "Hey, these kids want to play with you." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So they came around the corner. It was 4 kids, and they were all white. And they're like, "Hey, prior to this, guys, to be honest with you, I didn't know anything of a color." Okay, like we were kids. All we knew was I was in a Haitian household where my parents kept me sheltered. They didn't let us go anywhere. The only thing I knew was my brothers and sisters and us playing church all the time and having to clean. That was it. Okay. They always say in the Haitian culture, it's church, school, home. That's it. That's the places you're gonna go, and that's it. So I went over to their house. My dad at first, my dad was like, "No, I don't know." And he was like, "It's okay, you can come." He was like, "Well, understand that you're not going in their house. Don't touch their stuff. Don't eat their food. That's it. Don't go over there and cause trouble in someone else's house." And I was like, "All right, no problem." So I went over there and following my dad's rules. I was like, "Nah, it's okay. We can play outside." So we would play outside, and then they were like, "No, come inside the house." So then I was like, "No, I can't do it." So then their mom would go down to my dad and say, "Can he come inside the house and play?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And then I was like, "All right." So I went inside, and these houses are humongous and beautiful. I mean, it was 6 of us, 8 total in a 3-bedroom house where I was. And I'm looking at a house that was like a 6-bedroom house. And they had a snack pantry. I didn't even know what a pantry was. I was like, "What? A pantry? What is that?" So I'm looking at all these things that they had. I seen the pools. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So, like, "Hey, you want to listen to some music?" I was like, "Sure." So they're like, "Hey, we're going to go get our Dreamcast and we're going to play on it." And I'm like, "All right, cool." So we're about to go play the game. And then I heard, "Hit me, baby, one more time, my loneliness." I was like, "Who is this?" Next thing you know, I was singing the whole song. Y'all, I was down like Britney Spears. I'm listening to Christina Aguilera. I'm listening to NSYNC. I'm like, why didn't anybody ever tell me about this? Right? Like, what is this? This music is amazing. So I would go back home and, when MTV, we watch MTV now, mind you, we used to skip past most of the other stuff because we wanted to listen to the music we were accustomed to listening to. But that was the music I was drawn to. It got me. I ended up having their CDs. Every time we would go there now, I'm hanging out with them. We're riding 4-wheelers. My first time riding a 4-wheeler, a dune buggy. That was my first time on a bicycle with them. I learned how to ride a bike with those guys. And I was like, this is amazing. And then one day, one of them asked, they're like, "You don't feel different?" I was like, "What do you mean? You're different. Like, where's your family from?" And I was like, "Well, my mom and dad are from Haiti." And they're like, "Oh, so you're not from here?" And I was like, "No, I was born here." And they're like, "Oh." It's kind of was like an awkward silence. And I was like, I didn't understand. Like I would go to school and I would hang out with my friends and I would tell my friends about these other guys. And they're like, "We don't do that. Like, we don't listen to that." And I used to joke off with them, like, whatever. And I realized at that point, there was a difference. And I felt like I was gravitated to that life. Like as a kid, you want that life. You want that house. You want that family. They had dinner at the same time. It was all structured. I barely heard any arguing. At that point, I didn't hear any kids cussing out their moms like they do now. But it was such structured culture. And I was like, we had that, but it was with discipline versus a willingness. And it just felt different. And I wanted it. And that's when I realized I wanted to be different. So my brothers and sisters all went to one school. I tried to be different and go to other schools. My sisters and brothers did one thing. They were into church, and I wanted to go to sports and do other things. Because I saw the avenue, I fell in love with baseball and bowling. I saw a different perspective of life. I said, I want that life. But then I saw a lot of people who looked like me didn't want the same thing. And that just crashed my world. Like that just showed me something totally different from what I was around and had known. And I was like, okay, so a part of me was angry and upset that we didn't have that life. I was jealous. And then a part of me felt like it's a blessing to be exposed to it. And it changed me for the better. Now, at the time, I was lost. And then I grew up in an era as well at Miami Central where it was, you know, Zopound was in its biggest, that was like the biggest thing down here in this culture. And I was Haitian. Bro, I stepped onto the campus at Central. And if you said you were Haitian, you were getting beat up. Like, what? You're like, it was Haitians versus Americans. I was like, what is this? This existed prior to me, but my freshman year was like the culture shock of the world. If you said you were Haitian, you better be prepared to fight. It's like, wait, what? I didn't understand. There was no purpose behind the hate. It just seemed like it was a natural hate for being from Haiti. And then when Haitian Flag Day, the first Haitian Flag Day I experienced, there were dunk Chevys everywhere, everybody in red and blue. I was like, oh my gosh, they were jamming the music. It was crazy. And I was like, oh, I must be proud to be a Haitian. And then the fight started. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not saying a word. I didn't want that part of it. So like going back to Charmaine's point, people labeled you back then and you didn't know what that was until now. They labeled you and put you in that corner. And it was in their pockets of hate that they would put you where they hated people the most. They put you in that position and they tried to make you different. You had to be someone else to be someone they liked, to not fall in that bracket. And I found myself being 5 different people, 5 different days of the week to try to fit in socially. And boy, did I realize being Black was a challenge at such a young age, what we had to deal with, right? So yeah, it's so great to expound on this conversation because I feel like having this conversation now helps understand what these kids are going through. Some people don't understand what these kids are going through in school, but school was the gateway to what we all have experienced almost. Like we learned that in that building that we were our parents thought we were in to be safe and protected and educated. It's supposed to be a safe space, but it really isn't a safe space. It is the space where your kids are getting the bulk of their learning. So that's why I want with my corporation to help reach out to more of those kids and be a light, you know, and a part of guidance and working along Charmaine and working with Kirk to continue to help more, reach out to more, because they have such a reach on so many of the youth that we can work together. And that's another part of it is partnership, is finding groups to partner with together because no one can do it alone, right? So I love how this platform brings everyone together so that we can all come together to find solutions as a group and attack it as a group, because I feel like we're in numbers, you know, we can conquer anything. So I just love this platform, and thank you so much for having us, Jamal.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. You touched on a lot, and we're making notes here, and we're going to come back to something that you mentioned about survival and like being a chameleon, trying to blend in to survive. So that's something we're going to circle back on when the roundtable opens up. Moving forward, Jason Jenkins, Senior Vice President, Communications, Community Affairs for the Miami Dolphins. And I just want to say, I truly believe in giving someone their flowers while they're living. And Jason is very involved, very prominent leader in South Florida and Broward County, but also a prominent leader in the NFL. So for somebody like me who wants to aspire to work in the NFL, and you look at how few people who look like you are in executive positions and one of the highest ranking positions at the team level, it's inspiring. So I'm grateful and thankful to have Jason a part of this platform. So if you don't know who he is, I highly recommend looking up Jason. But Jason, can you tell us more about your experience and the work you do, and if you have a time that you would like to share of when you discovered that you were a color?
I appreciate thanks for the introduction. I'm super honored and blessed to be here. Like I said before, I can't say enough about what Albert Wilson has done for the Dolphins, not only on the field. I remember that Chicago Bears game, we single-handedly won that game, but also in the community, what he's done as well too. He's a true leader, leads by actions, and he's not someone that just talks about something, because we know he's kind of quiet, but he carries a big stick in his actions and some of the things that he's done. So I'm proud to be here with you. I'm proud to be here with the organizations that we have here today, that we are either working with or in the process of working with in the future. So for me, my parents kind of always instilled in me that I was Black, but they talked about their experiences. I grew up in Texas, and I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas. My mother was in Port Arthur. My father was in Beaumont, two small cities outside of about 45 minutes outside of Houston. And my father was a big movie watcher, and he talked about having to watch James Bond movies from the balcony because of the color section of what they had. My mother talked about water fountains, but for me, I grew up in Houston, Missouri City, Texas, and I was like 95 to 99% like Black, in terms of where we lived, the family, the friends, the teachers, the school. It was pretty much like, I'm probably dating myself, but it was like a Hillman College, like a different world, when it came, to that area, growing up. But I always knew I was Black, but I never saw like a difference because I was sort of like around in this zone, of people. I went out, I played, football at Willow Ridge High School, and I also played football at Texas Tech. Don't Google me because you won't see any stats because I didn't play, but I was out there. I tried hard. That's what I always try to say. But following my father's footsteps, he was a professional football player and a coach. But I was in Houston, headed to Texas Tech. I was about like 18, 19 years old, and I don't know why I bought my furniture in Houston to ship it to Texas. New furniture in Houston to ship it to Texas. That was just a dumb decision to begin with, but it also taught me something. And so, I was out at Tech, which is about a 12-hour drive, a completely different environment. It's complete opposite of Houston in every conceivable way, whether it's race, whether it's terrain, whether it's snow. It snows in Texas, all those kind of things as well. And I was on the phone with a person from the moving company. And we were just having a conversation, like, where we've been waiting for a while. And he's like, well, why don't you shut up, N-word, it's going to get there when it's going to get there. And I was like, what? It kind of like, it shocked me because obviously you heard the word before, but I've never been around, different people other than me for the most part, and never definitely heard that word said in a way that was demeaning, degrading, less than, in a really like, a slur in that area. So I like took the phone. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm paying you to try to get this to come in. I mean, you service. I don't care about N-word. We just keep it. You get it when you get it. And so I'm gonna call my lawyer. And I ain't had no lawyer. What I was talking about. I was just trying to be big or whatever. But I was like, okay, now this is what my family talked about. This is what my parents have to deal with. My grandparents have to deal with, and this is what this is. And so, what am I, going to do about it? But it's also like, it was okay. It's good to know who you are because I know you and I can see you and I'm not paying you, number one. And so it kind of put me on edge and it kind of shaped who I am in terms of, I'm always going to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm always in my mind going to say like, what are your intentions? What are you? And now I know I'm different, but I'm also not less than in any way. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my skin. I'm proud of my experiences, and I'm proud of how my family raised me to be where I am, today. So that was a good learning experience for me. I'll never forget at Texas Tech, we had a Hispanic professor, Dr. Martinez, who was our Texas history professor. And one of the white students in class, it was predominantly white school, asked him, why do you always wear like a suit and tie? And why do you have office hours certain times? They said, well, I come in and I wear this because I don't want you to think I'm the janitor, in terms of what it is. And that always just stuck with me, just in terms of how you carry yourself, present yourself, and also show that I'm not gonna let you define, who I am and who I'm gonna be. So I always carried that and took that, with me until my life, how I approach my family, how I approach my studies, and how I approach, growing. And so, I've been fortunate to be around and working in schools in Pennsylvania, around people not like me, coming back down to Texas, Southern University in Houston, Texas, a SWAC school, getting a chance to be there. And I always go to San Francisco with the 49ers, and now in Miami, where I oversee our communications, community affairs, and social media departments, and as well, and great to be in an environment where we have an ownership group of the people that, you have an African-American head coach, African-American general manager, assistant general manager, coordinators. I'm not saying like we say Wakanda forever in the halls, but it's good to see a lot of people when you come by. But being in all those things help shape who I am today, shape my environment, and more importantly, shape my work ethic, because I'm not going to let people like outwork me, and I'm not going to let people define who I am. And I understand that I'm in this position, but I'm being looked at. And if I slip up, it means Jamal's not getting an opportunity. It feels not getting an opportunity. The people on this call are not getting this opportunity. So I take that responsibility and accountability seriously. I'm not perfect, but I'm always going to try to work in a way that represents my family, represents who I am, and as an African American, also represent our community as well.
Thank you so much. You touched on a lot. It's a question that we have specifically for you later on that we're going to circle in, but we're going to move forward right now and get Adamma Ducille, once again, Assistant Director of Training and Capacity Building at Children's Services Council of Broward County. So Adamma, feel free to share your experience. You touched on some things and went in depth earlier on a few things, but feel free to share your experience and some of the work that you're doing in your role.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to start first by thanking the Albert Wilson Foundation and also Handy for inviting me into this conversation. It really, it's been a journey during the week to think about some of my experience. I always kind of summed it up for me as one experience, but over the course of the past few days, like a few different experiences kind of has risen to the surface for me and, shown me how my position now has been shaped by, past, experiences. So really, really just, it's grounding me in a lot of ways. So, and I'll start with a few. And the first one for me, all of them happened between the age of 17 and 20, and most actually when I grew up in the city of New York. And Bronx girl here, so for all of our New Yorkers on the call. And I think the thing that surprised me the most when I was walking myself through them is I normalized them all. None of them were out of the norm for me. It was nothing that, wasn't unusual in, being who I was and where I was from. And the first happened before I was 19. And I remember, we grew up in a place where bodegas and, little coochie free and Chinese restaurants. That was just how we all, and I had gone that night to go pick something up from the restaurant. Hopefully I'm not frozen. You guys can guess it. I'm gone that night to go pick something up from the restaurant, and I was on my way back home, typical fashion in a hoodie, and boots, and was pulled over by the cops. And I mean, just in the most horrendous, pulled up on me, lights, and was asked to stand against my own actually home fence. I was literally in front of my residence, about my key in the gate, and walk upstairs. And it was just really had no clue how it would, progress and how it would end. And, I remember them asking me like, what's in the bag? And funny to answer, all I could say was chicken, sir, like there was nothing else. And I don't think he realized that I was a female. He probably thought I was a young man. And I took my hood off and they let me go, but it was just the whole nature of the interaction with the police. And later, in sharing the experience with friends of mine that lived in my community, we all could relate to having the exact same experiences. And at the time we joked, like one person said, you're so lucky, that you left with your food, because he joked at how the police officer had like slapped his food to the ground, basically. And, that was, but it was something that was so normal for us. It was just something that we were used to. It was during that stop and frisk period where no one needed a reason. You just walk in literally my community in front of my home. And that was one. And a second was when I graduated school. I had gone to school mainly, throughout New York City, and always had done to what I considered well in school, always performed well, top classes within my school, top, within my class itself, graduated salutatorian. And I went to John Jay College for my college experience. And I remember sitting in a philosophy class and hearing people talk about the Celts and the Celtic religion and the Celtic culture, and just being completely, out of my element, no clue. All of the other white kids in the class knew points of reference, could participate. And there I am thinking in my head, how did I miss this? Like, where in my whole, 12 years of being in school did this not come, within my purview? I knew Shakespeare, I could talk to you about those things, but I had no point of reference. And at that time, in order for me now to perform on the level that I need to, I had to do a bunch of remediation on my own. So, just thinking back on how the school system, although I was doing really well in my environment, had not prepared me for the outside world. It was a big shock, and starkly against, the counterparts of white students, not Hispanic, because, New York is very diverse, but wherever the white kids in New York City were going, their education, and most likely public, because we were in a public college, was completely different from my own. And it just brought that reality to me, and it kind of grounded me, and wow, real difference, always done well. And then for me, a third, and I think until this week, I never really thought about the fact that what I had experienced was a racist or race-based experience. When I was 20, I had unfortunate medical condition, and I had to have a procedure done that required general anesthesia. And I remember feeling nerves and going through the whole process. And right before, if anyone has ever had a surgical procedure, there's this twilight moment where you're kind of half awake, half asleep, and you feel a little foggy. And I remember in the moment saying to the doctor, "Wait, I wasn't ready. I need time. I think I changed my mind." The nerves just overtook me, and he just didn't respond. I remember him pushing me down and holding me back. And then after that, I just fell asleep. And whatever happened afterwards, the procedure went, I don't know, I wasn't conscious to know how everything proceeded. But I know after, one of the medical staff came to me and she gave me the number to the facility and told me that I needed to escalate and speak to someone about the experience because it was wrong, and what he did to me was wrong. I should have been handled differently. And honestly, until this week, I never thought about if I was of a different race, if things were different, how would that have played out? How would that have played out for me? And I think back now when we look at health disparities for Black and brown women and what is happening to us, even when we have high levels of education and experience and we know better and we talk and we advocate for ourselves, we still end up in, with different outcomes and, different circumstances. So that was one that, that trauma really, that I never put in a race-based kind of perspective to look at it and what had happened. But she was so moved to have to come to me. I didn't do much with it at 20 because I wasn't, I didn't have the skills to advocate for myself, but it really made me think this week. And finally was an experience that I had working in the city. So I lived in the Bronx, but I worked in Manhattan predominantly and went to school in Manhattan. Would spend late nights, hanging out after class or after work with colleagues or peers, and would take cabs home on a regular basis, yellow taxi cabs, the kind we always see on the TV and the movies. And I remember getting in a cab and we're about to cross the 3rd Avenue Bridge, and the cabbie asked me to pay for my ride in advance. And in all my years of living in the city, I'm like, you don't pay. First, it's a meter, so I don't know how much I'm supposed to pay. And this is not, normal. And he goes on to persist and threatens to, put me out of the cab if I don't want to pay in advance. But then I think at that time I knew enough to, write down his medallion number and write down the information. And I actually took him to court, and it did go in my favor. But I remember being in that little courtroom, small courtroom, and really coming to tears, really to kind of grip what it was that he felt about me, where he felt the need to have to ask me to pay in advance because I was going to an address in the Bronx. And I think that was the first time ever in my life, especially when it had to deal with a matter of race, that I had enough to know to resist and to fight back and not to let this incident happen so it wouldn't happen to someone else, and to really stand up, not just for myself, but for my people, for other people who would have this same experience. So, those were those pivotal moments for me, and they all really, looking back, shaped now, what I put into the work that we do at the Children's Services Council with our partners at Broward County Human Services Department, and educating people as much as we can about race equity and social justice, and becoming anti-racist, organizations within this county and hopefully within the state, and to let it grow out from there.
Thank you so much for sharing. Truly, truly appreciate it. We're going to transition right into our panel discussion. And I do believe you all are parents. So the first question that we have, so as it pertains to becoming a color, as a parent, how do you prepare your child for this inevitable realization of becoming a color? As a child, was this ever explained to you? How did these conversations lead or prevent trauma in both parents and children? So whoever wants to go first, feel free. Dr. Charmaine, let's start with you.
Okay. I'll start. How do I prepare my kids? it was always that I raised the girls to like, be safe, be vigilant, look around, you know, make sure that, you know, you're safe for other reasons other than race, interestingly enough for me. But recently, and I think the young people are galvanizing and getting in the face of the world in a different way. And they're presenting themselves very, very aware and strong and resilient and not backing down from that and holding their own spaces for themselves and not simmering or closing down or hampering their own growth. And I think for me as a parent, I both love that and feel freed by that, and I'm also terrified because we're also so immersed in the realities of what we've always been immersed in the realities of, and it's out there and it's raw and it's real, and we're watching it every day, and we're noticing microaggressions, major aggressions, all of the things that has always been there, but we've not been. And I go back to what Adamma says, this re-education or this education of ourselves that we didn't even know about, right? That was hidden from us. So we have to sort of do some remediation work. And that's the type of space that I'm holding for myself and for my girls and for our young people, is this remediation opportunity to learn and to educate ourselves in the ways that we need to be educated, because that education allows us not only to be seen by others, but to be seen by ourselves, you know, to be seen as who we are. And so I found myself the other day when we started to see a lot more of the uprising and protests. My niece actually went back to Georgetown, and she's a student there, and she left us. She was here with us, staying with us for a week. She went back to Georgetown, and we couldn't find her. She was protesting, and she had lost her phone, and she was on the front lines, and she was pepper sprayed. She was, they shot her with rubber bullets. We couldn't find her. We were terrified. Someone found her phone, and eventually we found her, and thank God she's safe. But she went back out on the front lines the next day, And so I caught myself saying, instead of, be safe, have fun, or whatever, I said, continue to be strong and be resilient and be aware. I had to change my language in order to see her and see their struggles and to see our struggles and to see how they're fighting for it. And they want to be seen and they want to feel heard and validated, and they're just not going to take it anymore. And so I needed to be an ally with them on that, and I needed to support them, and I need to listen to what they're experiencing and their struggles. And it wasn't far from mine. The difference is that they're able to talk about it in a different way. They're able to fight for themselves in a different way. And so, even with that, I have students that I talk with, and I'm a teacher every day. And one of the things I caught myself, asking one of my students the other day is, how are you talking with your kids about what's going on? And she's a Latina woman, and she said, I'm not. They go to school, and they go to private school, and they don't see those things. And I just thought, how interesting is that? That I didn't say this to her, but she's not having these discussions, and my white counterparts are not having these discussions. And I'm finding myself having these discussions with my nephews and my nieces and my daughters and our friends and things like that every single day. And I can't sleep. I can't sleep because I'm thinking, well, it's now this o'clock and they're not in, and there's a curfew, and please leave the house at a certain time so that you can get back. I don't even want you to be on the street close to the curfew. If the curfew is 11 o'clock, please leave and be on the road at 10 o'clock, because I need you to give yourself ample time to get home, to get lost, to get back, and to get home safe, right? So I'm in a constant state of vigilance and terror as a parent. And also I'm in a state of proud, and freedom that I've never experienced before in this context in my entire life. So.
Thank you. Kirk, I believe you had a follow-up. So did you have anything?
Let me chime in here. Y'all remember when Obama became president? So we're gonna talk like we're at the barbecue right now. I remember my oldest son standing next to me and tears was running down my face, election night. And it wasn't for me. It was for him because of what he said. He said I could do that. And when he said that, it hit something in me because he saw himself in that role. He saw himself mirrored in excellence. And for the general public that doesn't understand, Black parents have a playbook. We have like 36 talks we have with our kids that other parents don't have to talk. Am I telling too many secrets right now? Right, so there is, that's the wrong haircut for you, playbook. There is, like Jason alluded to earlier, you gotta look like this, please. These interactions that you're gonna have with someone else, hey, come home alive. We could deal with anything else. And so, when my kids, one's 19, one's 17, one's 3, and one's 7 weeks, when my 19-year-old found out, when he had his Black experience for the first time, I was happy, but I was sad and I was angry at the same time. I went through all the stages of grief. I was like, this is still here. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Not liking somebody because of a color. I mean, there's so many other reasons you could choose to not like somebody, right? So, and having those talks, it's hard enough being a parent than to, I share your grief, Charmaine, your pain, like being terrified, because every time I see one of these videos, they look like my son.
Right.
And every time I remember the looks I got, and he talks to me about the looks he gets, you're right, I can relate. I'm happy. I can mirror and explain to him, Jason, to be the best product of himself and not be, not live extensionally as a color, but has the greatest expression of himself. Do the same thing with our young people at Handy. But as a parent, it is traumatic.
Yeah.
And it's sad because this new generation also is looking at us like, why y'all ain't solved this? Like literally, that was a question I got, right? What have you
seen this?
Like, yeah, Kirk, you 45, you ain't fixed this yet, right? Why didn't your generation fix this? And there was a time, if we're honest with ourselves, we looked at our caregivers and we're like, y'all didn't fix this?
Mm.
Right? So they're looking at us, and it's the most disempowering feeling in the world as a parent to know that there's something out there that you've been through that is traumatic to you in an instant, but also continuous, that your child now has to live through. And that's why I think, Adamma, the work that you guys do with racial equity and systemic change is important, because this is a generation to go to the source, right? So as a parent, teach them to be the greatest elevation of themselves. And that, back to you, Jamal.
Oh, thank you. I was just gonna follow up. So I not throwing out ages or anything, but I'm probably the youngest at 28. So I'm not too far from like this current generation that you all are referring to. But I think this is a great segue to a follow-up question I have. So one of the questions we have is, how do you inform your non-minority friends of the trauma? But then I want to add on to that, is it our obligation? Because I believe a lot of people my age or even younger are just like, well, it's not my responsibility to educate them, educate anyone on the trauma. So how do we have those conversations? And then going back to something that we touched on earlier about normalizing this and the normalization of things, and how we're socially programmed to do it just because we don't want to do it. We don't want to relive those moments. And then we end up suppressing our feelings or how we feel and don't have those conversations and how it impacts our families. So if anybody wants to elaborate on that, feel free.
Yeah, I knew, Jamal, you had talked about not wanting to throw out your age. You hit a straight strike with that with your 28 years old. So, I'm 45 as well. So I'm with you, in terms of that. I think for us in my role in what we're working with the Miami Dolphins, we're trying to get groups together that have like-minded views with humanity at its core, and having these conversations and going out and having it. Because I think a lot of people talked about this, but communication, I think, is the main way we can address these issues, and it's all about trust as well. When you trust people, you can talk to people like we're talking now and have these things, and we're all not going to agree on these things, but I think when we have the outcome that we're trying to help our community, help the community, help these kids, help promote education, those things. So in our role, we try to bring like-minded organizations together, to have these issues and have these, tough conversations, because I think when you have these tough conversations, you can have this. And my whole thing is like, don't try to cancel everybody for everything, because everything could be an opportunity. When someone says something wrong, something goes the wrong thing, oh, well, we're done with this person. They can't. Well, that's an opportunity to bring them in, because now the way they've been burned, the way they talk to you, you might be able to hear an open idea. And I just look at, Drew Brees for the Saints, when he talked about the military and national anthem, and all of a sudden, like he's done. And I know he's done a lot of good work for the community, a lot of good things around, the hurricanes and everything as well. But I think what was so great about it is that his teammates came in and said, we don't agree with you. We got a problem, but I can speak to you and tell you how we feel and have these conversations. And now more work is being done. So I think having some empathy, having open conversations, and when people, like Kirk said, check your friends, but also put your arm around them and bring them back in to have these conversations and move these things forward. That's going to be the only way, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I want to answer that as well with two different things. I think when you look back on history and you look at the photos and the faces in the crowd when change happened, all those faces didn't look the same. It was a diverse group of people. So we have to make sure that we bring folks along with us on this journey who are willing and open-heartedly want to learn and really have good intentions and learn to forgive along the way. And I think a bigger thing, because I think people have to position themselves in terms of globally what this means. We're so stuck on matters of race in America that we're missing the fact that globally we are the worst in faring in education. We are the worst in faring in health education. I mean, in health outcomes. And I don't mean Black people. I mean Americans. We can't even get on that conversation as a nation to try to get to a better place, because we unfortunately have our own work to do. But if you put us on, look at us on a global scale, we have a lot to pay attention to in terms of how we're losing ground. Even some third world countries are having better health outcomes, having better social justice outcomes, better outcomes in terms of how they are dealing with their law enforcement system. So everybody has to gain, a lot to gain, Black and white and all in between, with figuring this out and then tackling the bigger problems.
And I'd like to expound on that as well, which is, I think this conversation is amazing. Sentimenting what Jason said, I'm not one for cancel culture. I think that Drew Brees' statement, when it immediately came out, got everybody's emotions riled up. He almost doubled down on it and kind of stood behind it, but it took his teammates, when he realized everyone else around him kind of said, hey, this is wrong, he took a step back and tried to fix it. I think that what makes it a challenge sometimes is it's still happening. So we talk about history, but it's more of we're trying to address something that's a reality. And all we did by talking about it is allowed everyone who felt initially that they should be quiet about it to speak up. So our kids are now living in the generation that skipped us and was our grandparents, who lived in it where you could walk down the street and it was just screaming nigger everywhere. Now that's really what it is. The only difference is now you have a camera and everybody can record it, right? So now you're catching the behavior in real time happening everywhere, and our kids are exposed to it everywhere. And then we're trying to sit down and have a conversation behind it and say, all right, here's why this offends me, right? And trying to get to a point of level of respect. And then you get to a friend and you have a great conversation, and in the very next day, it seems like it's happening almost every 72 hours. It happens again, and you're right back in that bad space. So you felt comfortable with them 3 days ago, but when this happened again, it's like, wait a minute now. And in the story of the young Black man who was out with his friends, and then the guys tried to hang him, and his friends didn't jump in and help him. It's like, okay, now Do you still feel comfortable walking with your group of friends? If this happens to you, it's they're revisiting history in real time. So we want to have that conversation, but we also have to figure out how to get our kids out of this circle of terror that they're living in constantly in their minds. That, you know, as a parent, as I sentiment, I can't sleep at night. My son, I just wake up and I give him a kiss because I know that he has to go through these things. And how do I feel comfortable sending him off to school? I see kids walking home from school around him sometimes. I'm like, how as a parent do I feel comfortable that I feel like I should be there to pick him up, to drop him off? Because if he stopped and someone questions him, I don't know his state of mind at that moment on how he would react, because he sees what happens on TV, and you can say the right thing, you can do all the right things, and it can still go bad, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. The healing process is we have to have the conversation. And again, a broader scope is that America needs to fix a lot of things. But how do we stop the reality of it? Because it's just becoming too real and too common that we're saying justice for, hashtag for. I want to stop being a hashtag. Like, I don't want that to happen anymore. I don't want to have to paint streets or paint walls or go crazy. We should be able to just live normal lives. And that's where the youth are fighting and fighting nonstop, is because they just want to live normal lives. They don't care of anything we dealt with before. Even if you talk to them about the past, they're like, forget the past. I want right now to live and live without fear. And that's why they're walking fearless to try to stop these things. So, you know, I want the conversation to continue because I have friends of all cultures, all backgrounds, and I respect each and every one of them. And we can have that unfiltered discussion. And I just hope that we can continue to grow from that, and everybody can just be open-minded, because I think open-mindedness is the key. So.
Can I just add something to the question? Really, when I heard you ask the question, Jamal, I felt something rise up in me. I feel like some would say, you can't ask a historically oppressed people to teach you how not to oppress them. Right? I think that you have to come to the table. Yes, conversations need to be had, and you have to come to the table with information. Now, talking to one Black friend does not give you the history of an entire people, right? And so having the conversation, to me, if I'm having a conversation with you, I want you to be able to come to the table with something, some kind of vulnerability, some kind of, I don't know everything. Here's what I know, and this is what my experience has been. This is what I think. I don't want to come to the table with you because for you to say, I don't know anything, you teach me.
Right.
I think that's insulting. That's insulting. I think that's insult to injury. And I think that we have to hold people accountable for knowing more, for being educated and to educate themselves. There's tons of research. There's tons of information. Our research and information is at our fingertips, literally at our fingertips. And so I think holding me accountable to inform and enrich you and to guide you through the history of oppression and 400 years plus years of this is unreasonable, unacceptable, and incensing and insulting. So come to the table. Yes, I will have a conversation with you. I will not have the conversation for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kirk, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so, I'm going to quote one of my favorites, James Baldwin, about, we spent generations on generations studying the other races for survival. So now I think the maturity of our destiny has led to, it's time for you to study me. It's time for you to learn about me. And I'm echoing what Charmaine said. It's time for you to learn a little bit about me, but I have to also be, fair to, the people who have poured into me also, right? So I have a really close friend by the name of Evan Goldman, right? So Evan, taught me to say in a heart feels a heart. And we would filter discussions in a safe place between each other. Like, I don't understand this, explain this to me, right? I read this, is this the way? Is this what this is about? Like social interactions. And then I get with Richard Charlemagne and he would explain the entire Haitian culture to me, right? And then I'll get with my Puerto Rican friends and they will explain the Puerto Rican culture to me, right? And then I'll get with my Black American friends and, you know, being available and open to learn about what we're calling differences, but are even closer to similarities than we would love to admit, is the enemy of racism, right? And being open and always seeking to learn, but also informing yourself to a certain point. Like, don't come to me and say, I don't really understand why y'all mad. Wrong sentence, wrong. Read a little bit more, you know, YouTube it a little bit, and then we could have that discussion. But I also have to be open to the fact that my lived experience is in this Black skin. Therefore, some of the things that I have said in these discussions, these close-knit discussions that we're having, you've probably never heard the way I've said it. I'm almost certain there's somebody on Facebook Live like, what is it? There's a parenting list? Parenting discussion list that Black Americans have with their kids? Yes, we do. Right? So, you know, that's that, you know, leaving the door for communication to happen, but coming in seeking the knowledge, not like I'm a case study. And I'm definitely nobody's sociological charity sponge. You're not going to save me. You're coming in to understand how we can have a relationship. Jay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're coming up towards the end, but the one thing that I do want to bring back up or circle back to that Phillip touched on a little bit earlier is how is trauma related to healthcare? How do those things tie in, whether it's going to the doctor or the fear of going to seek out healthcare professionals? How do those things tie together? We'll start with you, Phillip.
As I said before, I think that we've learned not to. We've grown up with a distrust in the healthcare system, from the medications that we were getting to the treatment that we were getting, to the answers we were getting, to some of the things that we were getting, like we were provided from healthcare professionals. It just didn't come off genuine. From personal experience, I feel like it's dismissed. And you know, speaking for Black moms everywhere that have experienced trauma in childbirth, they feel unheard, and especially when it comes to pain and mental health issues when it comes to child, especially postpartum depression. Even in that bucket, not being prepared for what that's going to look like and how they feel after the fact. Seeking help doesn't seem like, they may say, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel there's a distrust there. It has been broken for a long time. And I think that has caused a trickle-down effect because our kids learn what we teach them. And if mommy and daddy don't always go to the doctor unless it's to get the shots that are mandated, I'm not going to the doctor because I only go because I have to go. Or unless something crazy happens and I'm getting transported by an ambulance or something, right? But outside of that, you know, you see other races, they got the checkups, the yearly checkups, the mammograms, pap smears, everything, you name it, they go religiously. And that just doesn't happen in our community. And it seems as, you know, there has been no gateway in education. And some of the things and the practices that, because we've seen, even with high blood pressure, families, there's so many organizations fighting a lot of things that are going on in healthcare where blood pressure medication is causing more harm than good in some instances, and the doctors aren't doing anything to protect the families. I think that it's caused a big amount of trauma mentally, physically, obviously, and the mortality rates show it, that we were dying at a higher rate in other races. And that's another conversation in itself that I feel like it's huge, that we need to have that conversation so that we feel comfortable that we're putting our hands in the trust of someone. Even speaking to Adamma's situation where she felt like she was in a place where they took advantage of her, right? And mind you, you're under a knife and you're under a scope, like you're knocked out. You don't know what's going on. You have to trust that person's motives when they took that oath, was to protect you, but nowhere in that oath does it say, I'm not going to take care of you because you're Black. It's not listed that way, right? So think about that. They could choose whether you live or die. That's a big choice to leave in someone's hands. I think everybody can say that. If you had to name 5 people off the top of your head that you could trust, if you were dying on the operating table, you couldn't, right? So trying to find mental peace in that, I feel like is the next phase. And I think that Charmaine might help us with that too, because I'm not sure if that's a conversation that ever came up with someone she's spoken to, but I'm sure that fear, it's something that I lived with, and I'm trying to get over, because I have to prepare my son who's growing up into a world to not feel scared to get help when he needs it. So.
So the question really reminds me, first of all, this question by itself needs a platform and a conversation. I think that yes. 2 minutes is not going to do it justice. So we will probably need to consider a more expanded session on this. But I think, Phillip, you and I have talked about this, and so I'll come with a solution, or my piece to a solution, or an anecdote to a solution later. But we talked about how it is so difficult to see when our white counterparts are in situations where they need a service, that their communities galvanize around them to deliver resources to their community, put up shops in their community so that they can walk 2 steps to help, and provided at pro bono or lower rates, or just free services, right? Just there. When we see our kids rioting in the street out of anger, and they're literally railing out of anger in our schools and things like that, and we see the trauma expressed in those ways, what do? We create services, but the services are in other neighborhoods where our parents are not able to have transportations. In some cases, they're working, they can't get to it, or it's so far out of reach, or the service is there, but they don't know about the service, right? And so we have to play a part in bringing our resources directly to our communities. And I say that because it is true. It is true that we need to bring it, and we need to make people aware that there are services, free and low cost services, that are available to them. And our Blue Couch, Kirk knows this, I've provided lots of free and pro bono services. I have assisted with my resource pool with people who would do free and reduced services for people who are not able to afford it. And I think it starts with that, but we have to continue the conversation about what the need is, and that people are needing it, and that they can actually have access to it without having to travel, without having to go too far for the services that's needed out there. And I think once they get to the service, right, the place where they can get served, I think they need to be met with clinicians and practitioners who actually can see them and serve them well and effectively, right? And not treat them like they're a free case or a free situation or a free service. You have to, if you see me for $5 or $0 or $500, you're getting an authentic service. You're getting the real deal, right? And we collaborate with practitioners who do that and do that well. No excuses. So that's just the start of a larger conversation.
and just to quickly touch on that, to make it even more grand scale, a lot of corporations don't even allow healthcare resources for their employees that are overworked, maybe over 40 hours, to have that resource to get stress counseling. I worked for a major corporation that allowed it, and they saw their employee retention rate go up, where people stayed in the job because they had an outlet to let go of the stress. Imagine being a single parent living in South Florida trying to work to survive. It's almost impossible on one household income to survive in South Florida. But then also imagine that you're being worked, you have forced overtime, you have childcare. If the kids get sick, somebody has to stay home. There's so many things that could put someone in a bad space. It not only impacts your mental, but your physical health degrades itself. Finding yourself in a circle of work, parents, you never find that relief for yourself. And then to feel like there's nowhere to go or no resource, and the corporations are like, oh, well, that's why this needs its whole own space, because there's so many legs of the problem here, right?
Yeah.
And in order for it to get fixed, everybody has to be willing to come together and say, okay, mental health is our number one factor. Once we target mental health, physical health and all those other things come together, because all those things tie right back into how you are mentally, right? So just wanted to expound on that a little bit, how this could have its own conversation, Jamal.
Well, there's a whole leg of the Blue Couch that speaks to practitioner burnout. And we have a program called Saving Superman. And it speaks to practitioner burnout. And it's a nonprofit piece of the Blue Couch. So we absolutely should and could be having more conversations about that. And you're right, Phillip. The last thing I need is to be working a 9 to 9 at night, and then, or whatever time, be burnt out. First of all, people look at burnout as a liability for the agency. So I can't go to my supervisor and say, hey, I'm burnt out. Well, we work in a field where we experience vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue. We apply therapeutic first aid all the time. And so for me to do that, to say to my folks, well, I'm burnt out, I can't see clients anymore, I can't see clients for a while, it's a liability in some cases, because when did you get there? You know, and who are you treating at the time that you were burnt out? So we have to, you know, catch it before it gets to that point. And to your point, Phillip, we have to be able to have conversations before it gets there, and with trusted parties that are going to, who are going to help us through before it gets to the place of pervasive burnout.
And Kirk, when you put that on, we have to make sure that we start with the lens and the historical perspective, because I think as soon as Charmaine started talking, immediately I thought about the punitive nature in which we're always met with things as soon as it's us. You know what I mean? It's easy for people of color, for our character to be the for why, you know, our actions were whatever they were. And it's historic, you know, black people have been, you know, documented, you know, in books as having higher thresholds for pain and higher propensity for, you know, for things that people look at as, you know, being, you know, wrong or against, you know, ethics or morals. So that lens has to be, you know, clearly put against the outcomes. You know, how did you look at the child when this action or this behavior, you know, was being, you know, viewed, and how did you approach the woman who came to you with her health problem? So I think the lens is so critical.
So I love how Adamma just gave me another forum that I need to organize. I really appreciate that. But, you know, for mental health and physical health, there's an elderly gentleman that I met in Tallahassee that broke it down for me. And he said, do you know why the old Black man is quiet? You know, those older people, they drop those one-liners and you go into this deep thought process. And he kind of goes over his biopsychosocial with me, Charmaine. Like, from 7 years old, I've been told I'm Black. You know, in middle school, I'm told I got to try 3 times as hard as all the other kids that I come up against in the classroom to get the same grade. And then I get to high school and everybody expects me to be brilliant in something else than a book. And we know those are some of those facades and are even acceptable natures in our own community, right? And then, you know, he gets older and culturally he's told breadwinner only. That's what you are. So these are some of those cultural faux pas that he was telling me about. And he was like, now imagine living your life 3 times as hard than the person right next to you that you're competing with for the same job. Living your life, right? Under the fear of everything that we see every day, like Phillip said, every 72 hours. And then he says, you get sick and you wonder why you're sick. Because all of that builds up in the anxiety, the depression. From the moment you find out your color and the unwritten codes behind being that color, it depletes you mentally if you allow it to come in and stay, right? If they don't make the transition, Jason, of getting to your greater self, if our young people don't make the transition to knowing that you're greater than what society is telling you to be, it manifests itself in somebody's hospital room. It really does. Because show of hands of people who've been traumatized in the past 6 months. Well, we had a pandemic, so that's probably like 90% of America right now, right? So, but before that, we were traumatized for like the last 3 years with something happening on the news every 2 weeks, right? So, you know, it bears on us from a physical health standpoint, and the trauma builds up. And that's why we're having this discussion, because it's an easy walk over. To me, one of my colleagues called me the other day and he said, "You okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He was like, this was early morning, Jason. I didn't turn the news on yet. And obviously, he saw the news before I saw the news, but he was checking in with me to see, are you okay? And I think that's the beginning of the discussion. When these re-traumatizing situations happen in our community, check in to see, are you okay? Because we can only, you know, repeat the trauma on each other if we don't cure it and if we don't seek to cure it. So I'm going to give this back to Mr. Jamal with the Albert Wilson Foundation. And again, obviously, I just got another segment from Charmaine and, you know, Adamma that I'm going to have to put together now. So Jamal, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a great way to close. And once again, thank you all for everyone for your time this evening and joining. We touched on a lot of things. But before I let you all go, if everyone could just offer one solution, one action item for our viewers, for those who are going to watch later on. Kirk, if you want to start, and then we could just go around.
Listen, I still come back to my original solution. Check in with your racist friend. We're in an age now where you just can't say, well, you know, my cousin, he's just that way. Because your cousin might be responsible for my kid's first moment realizing that society may see him as a color. So if you turn the faucet off, we could work on cleaning up what's in the sink.
Absolutely. Phillip.
There we go. All right. So one of my biggest solutions is, and it's an action item for me, is ensuring that we are educating as many kids as possible. So there's so many organizations, and prior to COVID, you know, I met with most of you that we wanted to partner together to create multiple organizations coming together and allowing all of us to put all of our resources in one room and giving back to the community. COVID happened and that kind of blew that plan up, because it was like, you don't know what's going on. You want to put people's safety at risk. We're having a conversation of mental health, and we don't want to put people in a bigger space, but that's really what it is. It's education, allowing all organizations to not try to get to the same route in different ways, because these times call for us to come together in one room and put aside all our mission statements, because the goal should be to empower, educate, and enrich our kids, right? So we need to come together and drive towards that rail together, because if we do, then we can see a bigger impact across a greater number of youth, right? Because there's so many that are unserviced. Kirk, you can speak to this a million ways. We can speak to saving 500 foster kids in South Florida, but there's another 1,000 in North Florida that don't get touched, right? Like, there's just so many opportunities out there of kids who don't have the access to the resources, and we have to bring them back to it. So that's what I was in the process of. So that's my action item. That's my solution, is providing those resources that Charmaine was talking about to everyone, to let them know they're available, so that we can start impacting our youth more effectively.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Jason, you want to go next?
Now, just echo along those same statements. Just about, you know, communication, get out your comfort zone, have empathy, and just communicate with others. And this isn't a statement in terms of anything, but until this is all of our problem, we're not going to get it to where we need to be. So I think it's really communicating, bringing people in, and let's work together, like what's been said throughout this whole conversation, and continue to be consistent. That's why I'm so impressed about what Handy and Albert Wilson Foundation has put together with these events. You're talking about a wide variety of different things, but under that same umbrella. So consistency and communication for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Charmaine.
Yes, sir. So I have a couple things. So first of all, I'd like to say I'm reminded by something Salvador Minuchin said. He said, "We didn't know what we didn't know. We were ignorant, but knowledge rewards a prepared mind." So for those folks who are seeking to understand and to want to hold space, I would say to you, prepare your mind, get educated, and start to drink a cure for ignorance, and drinking a cure for ignorance, and that is to apply some knowledge to you. And you can access it at any time in this community, in the society that we live in. And the other thing is too, I want to look to our Facebook audience and people who are hearing my voice. And I want to say that help is out here. People are here to help you. And I know sometimes it's daunting to ask for help, myself included. If I don't know something, sometimes I'm afraid to ask. And the thing is, if you don't ask, you don't know that a solution is out there. And we have people in place. We have people. I have people who know people. You guys all have people who know people. You are that person for someone. And I would just urge you, I would just invite you to say to yourself, I'm afraid and I'm going to ask anyway, because we are here to help, not only in our community, but communities, common unities among us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to close us out, Adamma.
For me, I think we have to find a way to weave the moment that we're in right now into the fabric of America, and not to let it be a moment. It has to be a permanent thing. For Black people and people of color, we have to continue to resist and make sure that the things that we know need to happen end up in policies and end up in laws and changes the system. And for white people, I think right now, if you're feeling this feeling of being woke, figure out how you stay woke and stay woke for generations. We have conversations with our children during different stages of their development, of how to be a good friend, why you shouldn't lie, things that build character. Until we don't need it, you need to have conversations about being anti-racist and what racism looks like.
Thank you once again. Thank you all. I think this has been a great discussion, very informative. Just a quick teaser for the next, we will be back on August 6th. So a few weeks from now, and the topic will be grading the face of oppression. So grading racism and who has the greatest impact on the Black community. So another exciting panel, another exciting discussion in the works in a few weeks. So once again, Jason, Dr. Charmaine, Adamma, Phillip, thank you all for your time. Kirk, as always, thank you for your time and your leadership. Appreciate everything. Feel free to leave your contact information or more information about you all's specific organizations and the work you all do on the Facebook Live chat or here, and we'll make sure appropriate people have access to it. So thank you all again, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Kirk.